More than a decade after hundreds of thousands of protesters filled the Capitol Square, Act 10 was struck down today by a Dane County judge. We have full coverage of the impact of this change. Political reporter Will Keneally starts our coverage with what we heard from the judge in today's decision.
If you remember back in July, the judge in this case indicated how he would rule. Today's decision just makes it final. Now it gets back to this issue. Act 10 barred general employees from negotiating as a union in most cases. Now they could only negotiate for raises tied to inflation. But there's a carve out for this second group of employees, public safety employees like police and fire. Now these workers were unaffected. Now, because the law created these two groups, the judge ruled in this case that the groups themselves lacked a rational basis in state law and that the law should be thrown out. Judge Jacob Frost didn't mince words when he threw out the state's collective bargaining law, Act 10. In July, he suggested the law was irrational and said he stands by those words while issuing his final decision on Monday.
Unless something is particularly egregious, rational basis will not provide a basis to overturn a legislative distinction like this between public safety employees and non-public safety employees.
The judge says he did find those reasons, but for some conservative attorneys, they disagree.
I think that this case departs from the proper application of the rational basis standard.
But the decision was long awaited by those working to overturn it. President of liberal law firm Law Forward, Jeff Mandel, wrote, "Every Wisconsin family deserves the chance to build a better future through democratic participation in a union." Because this ruling is now finalized, the case can be appealed. Now we could expect it to be before the state Supreme Court soon, which is currently controlled 4-3 by liberal justices.
Thank you, Will. Back in 2011, the fight over Act 10 drew national attention as tens of thousands of government employees filled the Capitol to oppose the bill. Our Braden Ross sat down with some of those employees today to hear how they're feeling now that they're getting what they wanted more than a decade later. Braden?
Yeah, 13 years later to be exact. These employees say after today's court ruling, the memories just came flooding back.
The district administrator made a statement that stuck in my head. And that was, "You have no idea what's coming."
That was Wisconsin teacher Matt Zebarth's introduction to Act 10.
I mean, it's like, what are they doing? This doesn't make sense.
He was one of tens of thousands of government workers who took to the Capitol to protest the bill.
It was a pretty angering atmosphere at the time because it just felt like an attack.
But by March 2011, it was clear
Those protests landed on deaf ears.
Act 10 barred most government employees in Wisconsin from collectively bargaining for better wages, working conditions, and benefits.
Suddenly, what you had one year, what drew you to a position, what made you want to make that life change, because the benefits were better, the pay was better, whatever that was, without any negotiation, was just changed. And it wasn't changed for the better.
Keith Hurlburt was working as the Iowa County Emergency Management Director in 2011 and saw the impacts of Act 10 on his colleagues firsthand.
They didn't have the buying power they had before Act 10. They couldn't go out to eat as often. They couldn't donate as much to the church.
For teachers like Zebarth, worse pay and benefits was only the start.
What that's created is a lot of good teachers mid-career leaving the profession. It leaves a gap as far as that mentorship and training.
But despite the challenges posed by Act 10, both Hurlburt and Zebarth say it wasn't enough for them to stop doing the jobs they loved.
The people who work for our government, for the most part, deserve respect, and they do good jobs. Their entire being is about helping everyone else.
And now that Act 10 appears to be on its way out,
I think that in the end, what's good and what's right will ultimately win.
Now, both Zebarth and Hurlburt told me they are cautiously optimistic about the future of unions after today's ruling. Again, there are still likely more appeals and challenges to come.